Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with the next video in the countdown towards the resumption of the 2020 Candidates Tournament, which was cut short in March because of the corona pandemic. It's all going to restart on Sunday, November 1st, and on Chess to Impress we're counting down by looking at the earlier 29 candidate cycles in the history of the World Championship. This is episode number 10. We have arrived at the candidate cycle which finished in 1968, but before we go into that, we have to return shortly to the previous episode. I left you in this position. It was Boris Spassky with the white pieces against Alberto Vogelmann on the black side from the Amsterdam Interzonal Tournament played in 1964. And I said here, white wins a piece. The queen is attacked. And if the queen plays, the knight on c5 will fall off the board. But I left out, shame on me, a very obvious response for black to try to get out of trouble. And it was Igor Govorushko in the comment section who pointed this out. He was very nice, he did not give out to me. He should have, because I completely forgot to show you what happens if black takes on b3 with a tempo, because it's check. White does not have time to take the queen. He has to recapture on b3. And after a takes b3, then black can save the queen and does not lose a piece. But it turns out that whatever black does, wherever he plays the queen to, he has a totally lost position anyway, so resignation from Vogelmann was appropriate. Let's have a look. What happens if we play the queen to d7? Well, then there is queen takes a7, and there's really nothing sensible to do against queen a8. The king is trapped by its own pieces. Let's try and play the queen to another square. Let's play it to f8 instead. Give the king a bit more space. Well, then the engine points out that there's also a forced checkmate on the board here. After d7 check, rook takes, and then queen e5. Black will have to start giving away his pieces on d6 to deal with the queen b8 checkmate threat. One last variation. What happens if we play the queen to e8? Well, then there is also queen takes a7, and the engine gives this variation. e5 is possible. Then the bishop just takes on e5, sacrifices itself, and after queen takes, there is queen a8 check, king d7, queen takes, check, king e8, and rook h2 e1, winning the queen because of the skewer. These are very convincing variations after the last move of the game, d5, d6, but of course I should have showed you these. Anyway, better late than never. And thanks to Igor for making me aware of this. Okay, let's leave that candidate cycle behind and focus on the next one. This is episode number 10. And here's a quick overview of the 29 candidate cycles. It started in London 1883, a long time ago, when Zukertort and Steinitz finished in the first two places in that tournament, and 3 years later they played the first official World Championship match. Steinitz qualified in St. Petersburg for a rematch against world champion Lasker. Paul Keres won the tournament in Netherlands 1938 for a match against world champion Alyagin, but he never got that match because of World War II interfering. The first official candidates tournament was held in Budapest and Moscow in 1950. David Bronstein was the winner. Vasily Smyslov won 2 candidate cycles in Zurich 1953 and Amsterdam 1956. Tal won the next one, and Petrosian qualified to play world champion Botwinnik by winning the candidates tournament in Curaçao 1962. Boris Spassky also won 2 cycles in Tbilisi and in Kiev, the last one in red, because we're going to look at a game from that cycle in this video. In the next video we're going to look at Bobby Fischer winning the next candidate cycle. Karpov came on the scene in 1974. He beat Viktor Korchnoi to qualify for a match against Fischer. Fischer did not want to play, and Karpov became world champion by default. Viktor Korchnoi won the 2 next cycles, and then we see Garry Kasparov's name. Karpov came back, won 2 more cycles before it was Short's turn to play world champion Kasparov. Anand was Kasparov's next opponent by winning Las Palmas 1995, and it should have been Alexei Shirov to play Kasparov after he beat Kramnik in Cazorla 1998. But Shirov never got a match. Kramnik did, and was the 14th world champion. Peter Leko was Kramnik's first challenger, And in 2007 we had a strange one. We had a World Championship tournament, which was won by Anand. And the 4 players that qualified were Aronian, Galfand, Grishuk and Leko. Anand's next 3 opponents were Topalov, Gelfand and Carlsen. Carlsen dethroned Anand, who came back for a rematch against Carlsen. The last 2 challengers of world champion Magnus Carlsen were Sergei Karyakin and Fabiano Caruana. Who will it be? Yekaterinburg 2020. It's all going to start very soon. As said, we're going to look at the candidate cycle that finished in 1968, and we first had the interzonal played in Tunisia in Sousse in 1967. It was played in October and November of that year, and the top 6 would qualify for the candidates along with Boris Spassky and Misha Tal, who were the finalists of the previous tournament. A major controversy occurred when Bobby Fischer, who was leading the tournament with 7 wins and 3 draws in 10 rounds, abandoned the event over a dispute with the organizers. Because Fischer withdrew before he had played half his games, the results of his games were not included in his opponent's totals. Bent Larsen went on to win the interzonal with Korchnoi, Geller, Gligerich and Portisch taking the next 4 places. There was a 3-way tie for 6th place among Reshevsky, Hort and Stein, who played a round-robin playoff to determine the final place in the candidates matches. In the event of a tie, the player with the best tiebreak from the interzonal would qualify. The playoff ended in a 3-way tie, so Reshevsky qualified for the candidates matches. This is the top 10 from the interzonal, and there we see the 6 players in green that qualified for the candidates matches. And here's the bracket from the candidates matches. Spassky beat Geller, Larsen beat Portisch, Tal beat Gligerich, and Korchnoi beat Reshevsky. In the semi-finals, Spassky beat Larsen and Korchnoi beat Tal. In the finals, Spassky beat Korchnoi, and if you look at Spassky's matches, you see that he won each match quite easily with a 3 points deficit. He went on the next year to beat Tigran Petrosyan in a World Championship match to become the 10th undisputed and official world champion. Let's look at a game from Boris Spassky. It is from the semi-finals of the candidates matches, where Spassky's opponent was Bent Larsen. We're going to look at Game 1. It was played in July 1968 in Malmö in Sweden. Spassky had the white pieces and opened with a d-pawn. Knight f6, knight f3, d5, c4, c6. We have a Slav defense on the board, and Spassky plays the exchange variation in Game 1 of this match, which will lead to a calm, symmetrical position. Taking with the pawn is the best move. Bishop f4, knight c6, knight c3, bishop f5, e3 and e6. We have total symmetry on the board. Bishop b5, and Larsen breaks the symmetry with the best move in this position, knight d7. Queen a4 is the most usual move according to my database, but here Spassky castled. Bishop e7, rook c1, Larsen castled, h3, rook c8 on the open c-file, bishop back to d3, the bishops were swapped, knight b6, and Spassky played the queen back to e2, very subtle move. a6 from Larsen, and Garry Kasparov analyzes this game in his book My Great Predecessors. I'm taking his comments, and here Kasparov says, Black already has a very comfortable game. His knight will invade on c4, and evicting it by playing b2, b3 will weaken the queen side. White often loses these positions. He has to play precisely and accurately. Let's see how Spassky played this. He played knight e1, knight c4 as planned, and knight d3. Here queen a5 is the best move, says Kasparov, but knight b4 was played by Larsen, which Kasparov calls the very first inaccuracy already leads to the loss of the initiative. Because now b3 can be played. Larsen took on d3, queen takes, and retreats the knight to b6. f3, bishop d6 offering a trade of bishops. Knight back to e2 to be able to take back on f4 with the knight. Queen e7, and Spassky decides to trade the bishops. And now queen d2. Preparing the knight f4 to d3 maneuver, explains Kasparov. Gligorich writes here, in equal positions, Spassky usually plays very subtly, and Kasparov says, for the moment there is dead calm on the board, but this is clearly not the ambitious Dane's taste. He does not want to reconcile himself to a draw and begins looking for active moves. As Spassky himself put it, with his customary optimism, Larsson wants to attack, even there where the position does not allow this. Let's see what Larsson did. He played queen a3. Spassky continues with his plan. Bring the knight to d3 through f4. And here queen d6, taking the move back, should have been played. And despite the loss of 2 tempi, black should have admitted his mistake and returned to d6, explains Kasparov. But not Larsson. He kept going on the road of, as we'll see, self-destruction. He took on c1. Rook takes, rook c8, those rooks were swapped, and now queen c2, and this is the point, explains Kasparov. The white queen unexpectedly breaks into the enemy position, exploiting the lack of harmony among black's pieces. His queen is isolated, his knight has no strong points, and in addition, his king has no escape squares, explains Kasparov. The knight is hanging on c8, so knight e7 was played. And now queen c7. Kasparov says the character of the play has changed sharply. White has begun to create concrete threats and Larsson has to defend. After knight g6, Kasparov says black is okay, but Larsson played g6, which Kasparov gives a question mark and calls an inexplicable move. Here Spassky could have taken on b7, that picks up a pawn. Black cannot take on a2 as then the knight will be unprotected. But as Kasparov says, Spassky subtly senses the change in the situation and calmly strengthens his position. He did not take on b7, he played knight d3. Knight f5, and here after knight e5, the queen can return to e7 and black is okay. So Spassky does not go for that and he plays g4 instead, the only winning try, says Kasparov. And now black should play knight d6, and after knight e5 he should play h6. Kasparov explains that black had to find this regrouping idea and can then still save the game. The black queen is out of play but cannot be underestimated. She defends the knight and ties down the white queen to the defense of the c1 square, from which saving checks can begin. In addition, with the pawn on h6, white cannot plan the flight of his king to the f4 square, and that's what we'll see in the game. Interesting to see Kasparov's explanations not so much in moves but in words. So we were at g4 and knight d6 had to be played, according to Kasparov. But Larsson in his game went with the knight the other way to h6. Kasparov explains that Larsson had become rattled at this stage. He cannot play actively, he had to look for a way to save the game, and that's not in his nature. Gligorich says, now the black king suffocates. Let's see how that happens. Spassky played knight e5. White suddenly creates a mating attack in which his king plays an active part, writes Kasparov. Queen b4, looking for counterplay against White's king. He's going to try and give a perpetual check, but Spassky had seen that his king can escape after many checks. The queen now threatens to give check on e1. That's why the queen went to b4 from a3. There was no check on c1, because that square was covered by White's queen. Knight d7, strong move from Spassky. He has seen that his king will escape. Queen e1 check. The checks begin. King g2, another check. King g3, and now Kasparov shows that after queen e1 check, the white king will escape. King f4, g5 check. This is the variation Kasparov gives. King takes, queen takes check, f4, king g7, and then queen d8. That threatens checkmate on f8. So knight g8 has to be played. Queen f8 check. King h8, let's show this variation till mate. Knight f6. h6 check. King h4. One last check and king h5, and there's no defense against queen g8 checkmate. Nice variation. All this after king g3 and then queen e1 check. Larsson must have seen this and decided to play knight f5 check instead, giving up the knight, still hoping for a perpetual. Spassky took the piece. Now queen e1 check, king f4, queen h4 check, king e5, queen g3 check, f4, another check, and king f6, and now the king is safe. As Kasparov says, such a victorious march by the king into the enemy's position always creates a great impression. Queen takes d4 check was the last check that black could give, and he resigned after knight e5. There's a forced checkmate on the board now. Let's look at one variation. If we play queen b4 to at least cover the f8 square with the queen, then there is queen takes f7 check, king h8, we don't need queen f8 mate, we have queen g7 checkmate. Kasparov says this purely psychological defeat so affected Larsson that the subsequent play was one-sided. Larsson also lost the next 2 games and in the end the match by 5.5 points to 2.5 points. Spassky again displayed a brilliant understanding of his opponent's psychology. He went on to win this match. He also beat Viktor Korchnoi in the final, and as said, he went on by becoming the 10th world champion by beating world champion Tigran Petrosyan in a world championship match 1 year later. I hope you liked this video and that you will keep counting down towards the restart of the Candidates Tournament with me. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel and please leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. If you like the video, if you like this series, then please share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter and on Facebook. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.